once again. No, well, not once again. This is the first time to the Red Room.
The Red Room!
At the Park MGM. And Widow's on my right, and Sid Punts is on my left. And how's that?
Get that finger up.
Yeah, so I'll hand it over to you, Widow, with our special guest, and you do the big intro, and we'll go from there.
Well, this is a very special day in Vegas for us, and this is the Vegas series, Vegas Tapes Part 2. We were here last year, and I met this bloke in the early 80s, probably, which we can talk about in a minute, when I was just playing a bit of cricket, played a couple of test matches, and I was playing for New South Wales, and he was a journalist for The Mirror. The good old days when The Mirror and The Sun and The Telegraph were out and you bought them. They were only like 10 cents or 15 cents or something. Also known as The Mole. That's probably going to give it away straight away. But Tony Adams, I've got to say, as a journo, mate, you've been around a fucking long time, brother, and you're a legend. So, on our podcast today, the legend Tony Adams! Howdy! He hasn't said anything yet. What's going on, mate?
I'm lost for words. I've been called a lot of things by cricketers and footballers, but never a legend. And it's a little bit embarrassing because this is my 4th decade in it. So I've been doing it a long time.
How long had you been writing for that paper before I met you? When did you start there?
I started at Rugby League Week in about 1979, 1980 under Jeff Prenter, who's a journalistic legend, still alive, was mad as a meat axe then, but taught me a lot.
Was that sort of a cadetship or something, or...?
It was, I sort of started part-time and he gradually eased me in. I was like a player almost. He made me do reserve grade for the first couple of years, but that was great because I got to know players, coming through, the Gary Jacks, the Craig Colemans,
That went on to play first grade and you had a relationship with them, yeah?
And I wrote the first stories about all these guys and they never forget the first story, their mums have got it up on the wall still now, 40 years later. And so we have a special bond. And same with coaches coming through, Brian Smith was coach of James Cook High School, went on the play or coach in 4 grand finals we had a great relationship. So
did you always want to be a journo? I mean, when did you work that out?
Well, I worked out at school I wasn't going to be a first-grade footballer, but I just loved rugby league and I loved cricket, and I used to go and sit on the hill before your days and watch Dougie Walters, who was both our hero.
Both our heroes, absolutely.
And I sort of started writing cricket about the World Series days, which was a real eye-opener. I think I was at the first day-nighter, which was memorable.
I was there too. That was the first game of the second season at the SCG, and over the winter, Kerry had said, "I'll build lights," and they wouldn't let him use those grounds, were they? In the first year, they said, "Yep," and that's the famous game where he went, "Open the gates and let them all in." My mother bought. This is a weird story. We just got onto this. How can we tell this story? We're sitting in the bob stand. My mum had bought 4 tickets. I had a mate, my sister, me, and me mum. And I was... So what year was that? About 80... No, 70...
Probably 78.
8 or 9. Yeah. So I'm just about 20 and I'm just in first grade or second grade, I think, first grade. And out they come in the coloured gear under the lights. And it was just a spectacle, wasn't it? And there was the West Indies were bowling short too, and the boys were jumping up to fend this off. And I said to my mum, I really want to do that. Like 5 years later, I ran out for Australia and played my first one-dayer against New Zealand. And I thought about that moment sitting there watching that game and how that inspired me to want to play under the lights at the SCG in the coloured gear. Why did you mention that game, Tony? What a moment that was, crazy.
Yeah. And I was there when you made your debut and we knew each other a bit by then, and my heart was pumping for you.
So was mine. Going out there.
Did you give him a good write-up?
No, I think I bagged him.
They were golden days. Do you want to move straight on to Vegas?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Because you were here last year.
Yeah.
We were here last year.
Yeah.
What was your first assessment of the NRL in Vegas for last year?
Well, I just, like a lot of people, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I've been around that long. I used to go to Henson Park where you couldn't park your car. You were sitting out in the rain. You were so far from the play you couldn't see a thing. And all of a sudden we were in Las Vegas, the entertainment capital of the world. I was almost in shock, like everyone said, Peter V'landys is mad, and he pulled it off. And
did you think
it was
when
great.
it was announced that it was a bit ambitious? Because they've signed a 5-year deal, haven't they? So that's sort of jumping down the rabbit hole for 5 years, really. Did you think it was a bit ambitious early? Did you
Definitely,
think?
yeah.
We did too, didn't we?
Yeah, and I was telling you guys, I used to live in America, and I would bring DVDs, because this was about 20 years ago. I lived in the deep south with my ex, and I would show them highlights of the NRL, and they would just sit there with their mouths agape. They couldn't believe it, but to them it was like a novelty. It wasn't a sport they'd go and watch every week, but they just thought, oh my God, where's the pads, where's the helmets, and all that blood?
Yeah, it must be to people that aren't familiar with the game really brutal. It's a brutal sport. I think the biggest shock we got, our shock started when we went to Fremont last year on the opening night, and we turned up in an Uber, and we went far out. We thought there'd be 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000. The whole street was fucking full of people. There was 20,000 people there, and we went, oh, how are we going to get even up near the stage? And out of nowhere, you don't know this story, this dude goes, Mike Whitney! And I turn around and it's a young bloke in an NRL shirt, and he goes, VIPs this way. And we're not VIPs. We haven't got our names registered, nothing. And I just said to the crew, follow me, don't say a word. So we went out the back. They brought us out in that red carpet area where I run into you there.
That's right.
And he says, Julie down there's got your names and all your bracelets. And I wanted to say to him, our names aren't on there, mate. And the girl just handed these bracelets out. And there we were. That's why I run into you. And we thought, how the fuck did we get here? We're not media passes. We had nothing. And then that moment we were there. And that changed it all for us. It was just insane. It was twice as big as what I thought, maybe more than that, what I thought in my head it was going to be. The activities, interviewing the bands, the people were just on fire. So what did you think the same? Was your assessment of that night in Fremont like, wow, this is big, and if it stays like this, it's going to be huge on Saturday?
Yeah, it was literally chaos, wasn't it? There were people running all over the place. There were security guards.
Yeah.
They stopped me, but I managed to talk my way in.
So we got in and you got stopped.
Well, I said, I'm mates with Mike Whitney. They said, this way, sir.
Hilarious. Did you? Yeah, after that, we thought, wow, this is massive, didn't we, Dawsey?
Yeah. And from your opinion as a journalist, the teams coming to Las Vegas, when this all first started, what was the team's view of going over to Las Vegas? Do you have any inside stuff about what the teams thought about it? Did they think it's a good idea, or
did they want to go? Did any other teams go, no, we're not going, it's going to affect the start of the season? Because I think probably the Rabbitohs, and it was the first year last year, and they don't know how they're going to prepare to come here and then go back and you're straight into another round. Probably hit us a bit strange playing here, and we just were a bit stuttery at the start of the season. They'd factor that into this year, wouldn't they? I don't know. Tell us, Tony.
Well, it's interesting when you look back on last year, and we're going to have to look back again in 6 months. The two teams that won in Vegas, the Roosters and the Broncos, had pretty good years.
Yeah.
The two teams that lost in Vegas, Souths and...
who else played? That's a year ago.
Manly.
Yeah.
Souths and the Broncos.
The Broncos, that's right.
Had shockers. So, I mean, it's a long bus ride home, isn't it? When you come all this way, all this expectation, and you lose. And they never recovered, Souths and the Broncos, whereas the Roosters and Manly really fed on it and had good years.
So would you expect now, when those four teams are named for next year, the preparation that coach has got to go through has got to be a little bit different at the start of the season to, I've got to take the boys to Vegas. We've got to get our head across that. And the media, like where we were yesterday, that was unbelievable when they launched it. And the mayor of Vegas gave Peter V'landys the keys to and went, "Yous are all good. You can do whatever you want on it." Don't say that to Australians and Kiwis and mad pommies.
I don't think the mayor of Vegas knew what he was doing there. These rugby league people.
He might regret that statement in 48 hours.
And he had a beer or a bourbon and coke, didn't he, on stage? And sort of, we thought, that's a good man.
He talked about he used to play rugby when he was younger, and then he mentioned about, it was all about the girls and the drinks afterwards, and he was like,
He's calling his beer.
Signed him up again, the mayor of Vegas.
But you were there yesterday. That was a fantastic day.
It was,
That's
and
bigger than last
that's
year.
a drop in the ocean compared to what Fremont Street's going to be like. It's going to be madness. You know, I think
You're looking at me. I'm going, what's going on there? You got some inside info. The mole's got some inside info.
I think security's going to have their hands full. Let's put it that way. All these drunken Aussies, Kiwis, and
Do you
Toms,
think there'll be
as you say.
30,000 people there tonight? There was 20,000 last year.
I reckon so. I mean, yesterday was, I think it caught the NRL by surprise. It was basically a media event. They said media come down and, a few fans can come along, and, well, the fans just flocked there.
What about when the one Wigan bloke went, I don't know what he yelled out, but, "Hey, you're up in there, you man," and they just sung that Wigan song for the next 3 minutes.
Yeah, I couldn't understand a word of it.
But when the Warrington captain come up, boo! They booed him and went, "Who are you?" That's going to go on.
Oh, the stadium's going to be great.
It's going to be insane. Listen to the pommies do
And
that.
I'll tell you a little secret, and this will get me offside straight away with the pommies. I used to play touch footy with your old South's fellow board member Russell Crowe. I invited him down our touch footy game down at Clovelly, and he used to come around and he loved it because he could just be one of the boys.
Yeah.
There were no
loved his
cameras.
footy, yeah.
No one knew.
Was he
And
any good?
he was like me, old and slow, but he knew what he was doing. But anyway, one day he invited me up to his box as his way of saying thank you to a South East game, and it was the famous day when South just gave it to the Roosters, and they had the close up to him straight after a Gladiator, and he gave the big thumbs down, and it was some of the best sporting theatre I've ever seen, and South put them to the sword.
And now you can say, I was in the box that day when he did that.
They gave it to him. But also in the box that day was a fellow called Simon Moran. I don't know if you know him, but he's one of the richest men in England, and he's a rock promoter. And he's also boss of Warrington. He's the Russell Crowe of Warrington. He puts all their money up. And we got to talking, and for the last 20-odd years, because this was maybe 15 years ago actually, I've been helping Warrington on the side, just tipping them players, not for money, just their chief executive, Carl Fitzpatrick's a good mate of mine, and you'll say to me, what do you think of this bloke? Some Aussie who wants to go over there.
Yeah.
I'll say, he's shit, don't sign him. No, 2 days later, 3-year deal. But I always have the last laugh. I come back to him and I say, "See, I told you he couldn't play."
I was going to ask you, Nick, do you follow much of the Super League? Do you watch International Rugby League at all?
Not an awful lot, but I do follow Warrington, and I got my photo with the Wolves mascot, and I was walking down the street yesterday and 4 Poms said, "It's the mall!" So I thought, yes, I've made it.
Talking of International Rugby League, last year on the podcast we had David New on, who's obviously the sort of the godfather or the grandfather of American Rugby League. When you were living here, did you know much about anything that was happening here rugby league wise in terms of competitions? Or
Yeah, I did, and I found a rugby union team in deep South Georgia, because union's obviously much bigger than league. Unions played in all the colleges.
Yeah.
But I know David well. Funnily enough, he was in Brian Smith's James Cook High School a lifetime ago, and it wasn't a bad little halfback. Played a bit of first grade, and we've always kept in touch. And he's got some event after the
we're going to it.
Oh, yeah. Well, so am I. So.
Just follow
Look out.
us. It's about 200 metres down from the stage, I think.
Just quietly, two newies set up, but they're having a band. They're having a live band.
Oh, dear.
He sent us through a few oh, dear. And so I think the three of us might be getting up and playing a few tunes.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Well,
Can you sing? We'll get you up.
not at all. But I met a nice girl the other night who makes a living out of selling weed, which is legal here, of course.
What's the phone number?
We saw Vossie's post, didn't we, yesterday? And all the Foxtel boys are there, and Vossie's sort of doing this photo. And what did he say?
He says, "Oh, you can smell the weed or something in 3 months."
Yes, breathe in, boys, the waft of marijuana across the desk. But it's everywhere, isn't it? Like
it is. Well, she just hands her business card out. She says he looks like a pothead, and just goes for some reason she gave me one. And we spoke for about half an hour.
Smoked for about half an hour. Spoke.
As I said, pass on her number after.
Yeah, Shugsy's not here.
On a personal note, when we were just downstairs because we're at the Park MGM here, and we're calling your room the Red Room. We'll take a photo because it's all pretty much red.
Spotless.
It's
red.
red.
It's immaculate.
You are, you're very clean, Tony. We love your work. And you mentioned just on a personal note that your father was a Holocaust survivor. So
yeah, both my parents were actually.
yeah.
They were,
tell us about that. I'm sure that not many people would know about that.
Well, they were born and raised in Hungary, and it was not a bad time to be born and raised in Hungary. They were born in the 20s, and lived through some horrible times with the Nazis. Somehow survived. Didn't like to talk about it much.
They went to concentration camps and that?
No, but my dad went to a labour camp, and that was pretty hard. My mum and her sister went into hiding, so it's like the stuff you see in movies. It's
imagine hiding every day.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Yeah.
And they didn't talk about what. Well, it'd be a hard thing to talk about, wouldn't it?
It would be, and I didn't press them, and then the sadder part was, I don't know if you know your European history, but after the Germans, the Russians took over. And they said the Russians weren't much better than the Nazis. So one night, and this was the mid-50s, before I came along, they didn't tell any of their friends. They left all their worldly goods in Budapest and just started walking. And they walked through cornfields, and there were people, guards, looking... not for them, but looking for stragglers who were doing exactly what they were doing, but somehow got to Vienna, somehow got to London. And the one story my dad does tell me is I used to ask him, Australia, why'd you choose here? And he showed me the world map, and he said, see Europe here? I wanted the furthest place away. And there was this big country down here. We thought, let's give that a try. And... he came here without a penny, started working in David Jones' food hall, selling cheese, and then started selling clothes, merchandise. He imported it from the USA, which no one did back then. Back then, it was a good time to be a refugee coming to Australia because Aussies just wanted to go to the pub and the beach. They were... spoiled, lazy.
Absolutely, and all the Italians, the Greeks, the Europeans worked their bums off, didn't they?
Yeah, well, my dad knew the Lowies. And
that's another story. He turned up with a suitcase, didn't he, Frank, and started a delicatessen, I think, in Blacktown.
Yeah,
and now it's Westfield. It's like, wow.
Yeah. And anyway, to cut a long story short, my dad died at 93, a very wealthy man with a mansion overlooking Rose Bay.
Wow.
Which is probably the reason I've been able to stay a journalist for 40 years, because you're not in journalism for money. You do it very much for the love of it.
Well, on journalism, because we had Paul Kent on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he talked a lot about how journalism has changed from back in the early days to now, and the relationship between the journalists and the players and the clubs is completely changed. So tell us your views on how you think it's changed over the years.
Yeah, I'm really sort of disillusioned in that I rarely go to games these days, because back in the Mike Whitney days, and it was the same with the Blue Sheffield Shield team, after the end of the game or at the end of the day's playing cricket, they'd just throw the dressing room doors open.
Yeah, that's right.
The journos would walk in.
That's right.
Mike Whitney would say to me, that fucking headline you wrote was a disgrace. And I'd say, hey, I didn't write the headline. And we'd work it out like men and we'd shake hands. But these days, you're not allowed anywhere near the sheds. You can ask for a player and the media manager will often come back and say, oh, he's not talking or he's gone out the back door. And so it's sad that we've lost that relationship and the closeness between. I mean, you Mike would have friends who are journos, but blokes like me who you still talk to after
absolutely.
40 years.
It has changed, but I mean, if someone got wickets or runs or whatever, you never thought about pissing off and running out the back door and not having a word with the journos. It was sort of part of what you needed to do, and they were giving you a plug anyway. If you had a really good day, why wouldn't you want to get a bit of media like that? And the relationships that I formed. I mean, you know, fellas like Frank Crook, I used to love seeing Crook. And he'd sneak away and light that pipe up. He had a pipe, and just the legends, absolute legends. And I think it is lost now. That the players don't have that relationship.
It's ruining. There's no characters in the game anymore, because when they do talk to journalists, it's a lot more sanitised than in the old days.
And if they say something controversial and it's a headline, you can guarantee that they're pulled aside and told, don't say anything like that again.
It's really sanitised now, isn't it? Which is a shame. I mean, do you ring them up and say, do they take phone? Like, if you rang me up in the old days, I'd, hey, Tony, how you going?
Well, we used to, on the Mirror, we used to ring coaches at 7 o'clock in the morning for the Mirror, because we'd have the back page done by 8 a.m. and then it was on the trucks and
then printed,
heading out west
for the afternoon paper. Yeah.
These days, if you ring a player, the first thing you'll say is, "Oh, sorry, I cannot talk. You've got to talk to the media manager." And of course, the media manager will say, "Oh, we've got a session on Friday. Maybe you could come to that and talk to him." But the problem is, I've done that a couple of times, and you go and talk to a player, and there's a Channel 9 microphone on one side and a Fox microphone on the other, and I'll see it on the news that night, and they'll be answering my question. And I'm thinking, hang on, I've done your work. I've done my work for you. And it's no good me writing the story then, it's old news. So you've got to try being a little bit devious and getting your stories other ways.
Because of that, is there young journalists that are starting to come through, or are they finding it just too tough?
Well, it's a whole different landscape for them. Like a lot of young journalists these days, a story to them is there'll be a game on and someone will do a head-eye tackle and Brad Fittler will say on Channel 9, geez, that was a bad tackle. And 10 minutes later on Fox or on Channel 9, the headline will be Freddie slams horror tackle. That's a news story. I mean, to me, that's not a news story. Everyone saw it, everyone heard Freddie, but that's what journalism has become. You know, there's not many blokes out there, apart from us old fellas, who know how to get original content. And so I'm a dinosaur, I'll admit it. And a lot of my contacts are either dead or been sacked. But, you know, I'm sort of hanging in there.
So what happens in the future, Tony? Like in another 20 years, when all you blokes are gone, or you're retired or bloody dead, whatever, what does the young crew do?
I'm not sure, but as you guys said, it's going to be very sanitised. There won't be too many scoops out there other than players signing, which comes from the managers who are, you know, the new power group in rugby league. Like these guys control the game. You know,
I suppose there's so much money in the game, as we've seen in Las Vegas, and how much they'd be spending to put this all on. I suppose clubs think that they can't take any risks with players fucking up or doing or saying things and putting all of that big, you know, money-making edifice at risk. So maybe that's part
That's
of
how rugby league thrives. We've got the key to the city. Run them up, boys.
Well, we saw the hoo-ha when two players went at it, two of the Raiders with a plastic bloody bat. So, it's really, you know, a worry. The clubs are pretty terrified that there's going to be another incident before they go home, particularly the night after the game. So, they can't get out of here quick enough.
On the flip side of them not talking to the media as much anymore, you must have had some run-ins with people when you have reported stories and they weren't happy about it.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah. And the better the story, the more the blowback.
I remember talking to you years ago because I'm a West Tigers fan, and there was a lot of drama around a few things you said with a few people at the Tigers. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we can. Yeah. Nothing's off limits here.
You were good friends with Tim Sheens?
Yeah, I am. And
not so much friends with Robbie Farah?
Yeah. And just to take the Tim Sheens story back, just to show you how much things have changed. Tim and I have been mates since the 80s, before there were any managers. And he rang me up. He was the first coach to get Penrith to the finals. Like, up until then, Penrith was a bit of a joke team. You know, they were the Tigers of the NRL, sorry to say. And Tim took over and brought a new professionalism to him. He got him to the finals. But one day he's called me and he says, I think this is after about 3-4 years there, he says, I think I've done here. I want to move on to a new club. And I thought, bloody hell, this is a good back page. But then as Tim does, he says, but this is all between us, off the record. So he said, have a think. And I knew Wayne Bennett. Now, this was an untold story at the time, but everyone sort of knew it, that the Broncos were starting in 1988 and Wayne Bennett was at Canberra and was going to go to the Broncos. He kept denying it, but we all knew it was happening. So I said to Tim, how do you fancy the Raiders? And, of course, they were a good young team coming through, and the Dailies and the Clydes, and I think Mal was still there or was starting up. Sticky was starting.
Yep.
So Tim said, well, I can't be seen to be making an approach. Can you call the Raiders? And I said to the Raiders boss, John McIntyre, who's still around, he was the godfather of Canberra, I said, you haven't got a coach for next year yet, do you? He said, well, we've got Wayne Bennett. I said, no, you don't. And he knew it, but he was towing the company line.
Yeah.
And I said, well, Tim Sheens, who's one of the best blokes in rugby league, and you've seen what he's done to Penrith, he's going to be in a cafe in Mossvale at noon on Friday. And Mossvale was about halfway between Canberra and Penrith. So he said, thanks very much, say no more. Click. And a week later, he signed Tim Sheens. Wow. And Tim went on to become the first coach to take a team from out of Sydney to the premiership in 1989 in probably one of the most famous grand finals of all time. So
wasn't that a great side, though?
It was, yeah. But I like to think I played my own little part in that.
It sounds like you played a big part in that, bro. That's fantastic.
And let's fast forward a bit to the Tigers.
Robbie Farah.
No, we're not going to get to that. This is more on Tim. He went from Canberra after winning 3 or 4 comps to the Cowboys, and it all ended in tears there, as it often does for coaches. And they sacked him, and he was without a job. And the Tigers were searching around for a coach. It didn't work out with Terry Lamb. And
John Hopper.
It
didn't work out.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And I rang.
Morning, John.
Wild times at the Tigers back then.
John's looking for me, by the way. So
He'd be looking for me.
But so I rang Steve Noyce, who was the chief executive of the Tigers, and I said, "Listen, you're looking for a coach. Tim Sheens is available." He said, "Nah, not interested." And they were talking to Craig Bellamy at the time, if you guys have got good enough memories. And they almost got Craig Bellamy, but he said no. About 3 other blokes said no. And about 2 weeks later, Steve Noyce rang me up and said, Tim Sheens still available?
He'll be at a cafeteria.
Did you get a commission for all this facilitating or what?
I'll tell you what my commission was, because this is another great story. So anyway, that marriage happened, and Tim took the Tigers to the I call it the never before, never again premiership. I mean, they did not have an...
Okay, Sid.
I'm not happy about that. I just saw your head just drop, man.
Big year coming up this year.
She's listening to this too. She's just gone down to...
I mean, that Tigers team did not have an origin player did not have a test player. Now, you look at Penrith, you look at Melbourne, I mean, they're just chock full of that's what it takes to win a premiership.
Yeah.
But somehow Tim found a way to do it with a young Benji Marshall, with Scotty, and the football those guys play. I mean, at least once a week I'll watch a YouTube. You probably do too.
High rotation at my house.
Just watch Benji's flick pass. That's enough.
The footy they played was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I said to Tim that week, mate, I've never asked you anything. I want to sit on the bench grand final day. No journo's ever done that, I'm sure, since 1908.
What, on the ground? On the bench?
On the bench, on the ground.
Wow.
He said, yeah, okay.
Wow, and you did.
So I was sitting next to the players on the bench, 80,000 people at Homebush.
Oh, man.
Benji's flick pass was like right in front of me.
Come
I mean,
on.
it was better than sex. It was the greatest night of my life.
A lot of people won't understand that statement, but if you're so involved in sport, I've got to say too, I've had some moments in sport that are better than sex. That's a big call, I know. But that must have been an unbelievable experience for you.
Oh, it was, and again, having played a small part in it, I mean, Tim knew it and I knew it. Not a lot of people knew it, but he hugged me after both grand finals, after the camp one, after the Tigers one, and they're special moments, and you know about special moments,
for sure,
and it's nothing like being a bowler and taking a hat trick out there, but for a journo, it feels good for a coach of a grand final winning team to hug you.
Give you a hug and say thanks very much, mate. That's beautiful. That's like winning the lotto, really.
The Tigers owe you big time, mate.
Yeah,
they do.
Thank you.
And one of my memories is been just about the last bloke to walk out of that ground at midnight, and I was thinking, this has never happened before, and like I said, it'll never happen again, and that was 20 years ago, so it was a pretty good prediction, but they cannot take this away from us. And poor old Tigers fans, whenever they're lamenting how bad things were, I say, yeah, but we've always got 2005.
Yeah.
What do you think how the Tigers shaping up this year? Have you looked over their squad, and what do you think?
Oh yeah, I think they've bought the best of anyone. I mean, Luai, Terrell May, they've got some good players. So the heat's on Benji. He's got to produce. He's had his 1 year honeymoon. You always get 1 year as a coach, and you can come last as he did and still not get sacked. But second year, you've got to win games, and particularly with the money they've spent and the squad they've got. I can't see them making the 8, but I can see them, 10th, 11th, 12th.
Well, when we make the grand final, you will not be invited down onto the field.
Just get off the bottom. You don't want to be wooden spooners again, man.
No.
You don't deserve that. I mean,
But we've always got 2005. I was there. I was hugging everyone and I was sobbing.
1969, I was there when they beat South. I was 10 years old and I cried all the way from the Paddington Hill to Matraville.
What do you think of...
It was a terrible day.
Sid, what do you think of Benji as a coach? Was it last year where there was that controversy where he went for a holiday to Fiji or something and he should have been home?
See, my problem is I've backed Tim Sheens, I've backed Mick Potter, Terry Lamb. I was a fan of Terry Lamb. Jason Taylor. I've been wrong so many times. So. We're up for a good year this year.
Well, I don't think you've been wrong, Sid. I think it's the board that's been wrong.
Constantly.
I mean, you've definitely got the cattle this year to do something. He's just got to, make them believe and make sure they're organised.
There is a lot of pressure on Benji in there.
Oh, it's got to be, mate. When you got the
Rookie
cattle
coach,
now, and they've paid
players.
big money for some big players. I mean, Luai's very good player, mate. You just got to make sure he's where he needs to be. And Lockie Galvin, who everybody's talking about, and mate, he's shown signs of could be a really, really good player in the
I
future.
had to delete a lot of Luai tweets now that he's come over to the Tigers. I'm on board the Luai
What do you
train
think
now.
about Galvin? I mean, he's only a young bloke, a lot of pressure on him too. He's got a really good other half now with him. What do you think?
I think he's a pup, but there's so much pressure on him.
Yeah.
It'll be good having Luai there alongside him, but yeah, it's a tough business. They're already talking about him breaking his contract and going elsewhere. That's all journalist talk, straight from the,
yes,
from the managers.
He won't leave. They asked him and he said, I want to be a Tiger for life.
Yeah.
So as soon as they say that, you think, oh, shit.
He's gone. Yeah.
And what about the women's game, Tony? Do you take much interest in that at all? Or
Yeah, I do, because it's just growing so much. And I'll tell you one thing, I reckon the game that will be the biggest hit with the Americans out at Allegiant, forget the Panthers, the Sharks.
You reckon the Test match?
Wigan Warriors. I reckon just seeing a bunch of women
good-looking women
belt the crap out of each other. But I wrote probably the nicest story I've written this week is of a girl called Sarah Tonegatu in the Jillaroos team, and she was raw and honest. Her brother, she comes from a big Samoan family. They grew up housing commission, dirt poor. Her brother went to jail. He killed himself in jail, and she volunteered all this. And she said her brother's ambition and what he was trying to achieve was get his family a better life. So she sort of took that on board, and with her football money and from working, she works teaching and this sort of thing, she bought a family a house.
Wow.
And there's about 4 siblings. They adopted 4 kids from Samoa. So you can imagine what the household's like, but it was just a really lovely story.
So rugby league has really changed their life.
It
and
has.
Female rugby league, basically.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, well, they're not getting the money the guys get, but they play less, they train less, so, they're getting a pretty good deal and they know it, and it'll grow. The fact it's on TV and people like to watch it.
Would we say it's more of a... because there's no testosterone and aggression like the blokes, I'm going to back and belt you or whatever. It's such a pure game. They tackle hard, they get up, play the ball, and they move on. We sort of say this about women's cricket. There's no, Mike Whitney or Merv, you say, the next one's going to go up. They just, sometimes the minnow teams, and I was only talking about this the other day, you watch Thailand play, they played in a World Cup a few years ago, they were running back to their mark. I'm yelling at the TV, you're playing international cricket now. You don't have to do that anymore. But it's just they're so innocent and the game is so pure. The umpire gives them out. They never bag the umpire. They just walk off the girls. Where blokes will go, whoa, okay. It's just a really... And I think women's rugby league, I feel the same about. Really pure. We grabbed Kezzy Apps yesterday. Now, I'm a big fan of hers. Never met her. What a gorgeous girl she was. And we said we want some of the girls on the podcast while we're here, just to promote it, because you guys are just going up to the moon so fast, and the women cricketers as well. We want to showcase. We just don't want to showcase the men. We want to showcase you guys. And this smile come on her face. And then the girls' manager, I think, was there. One of the team managers. He said, we'll get a few girls and we'll get them on the podcast. They can tell their story. They've earned the right to tell their story now. I think it's been great.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the good things, because they're minnows as far as, playing football and coverage. It's much easier to talk to a female footballer than it is to a male one. You've got to jump through less hoops. So this Sarah girl, you should get her on, because
that's a great story, isn't it?
It just about moved me to tears.
Wow. Yeah. Did you hear yesterday when the English captain didn't turn up and they said, she's been held up? Someone yelled out, she's scared! Kezzy App just smiled up on stage.
I think you're right, Tony. The women's game here could be a massive hit, because we were here last year and we were going around to a few bars and we were talking to people, Americans, locals, about that there's no equivalent, there's no NFL women's league, or so there's nothing.
There was the lingerie league.
Yes, of course.
Probably the best sport ever invented.
I tuned into that when that was on.
How could I forget?
That's the only... Why did they can that? That was fantastic.
Lingerie rugby league. Maybe that could be a thing.
I'll tell you where you can see old games.
I knew you'd know
they don't date.
I knew you'd know that. But yeah, look, the girls will be great. And I think you're sort of right. I reckon everybody will watch that and go, wow, look at them beating each other up, and they're gorgeous and they're unbelievable athletes. It's not as if they're not good athletes. These girls are excellent athletes. The girls playing cricket now, they're so fit and fit. Like, what do I say? There's no sort of fatty boomsticks running around anymore. Can you say that?
Well, we can hear.
We just did. They're so fit and strong and athletes. What about Isabel Kelly, the girl that plays in the Centres? She went away one summer after one season, turned up the next year and I thought, wow, she's definitely been in the gym. And not long after that, I read about the program that she went on to just reinvent her body and strength and speed and whatever. Mate, genuine athlete.
Yeah.
Surgis, the girl who plays next to her.
Yeah.
Phenomenal athletes. They're just, they can run and jump and tackle and all sorts of stuff. And if you probably talk to them, I don't know, they'd say, oh yeah, I did a little athletics and I was a great netballer and I was in the nippers down at the beach, and they just cover these multiple sports off. They're just really good athletes.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I don't mind a bit of a punt. I'm keeping away from the blackjack tables as much as possible. But I thought, these Aussie women are going to pump these English girls like they won't know what hit them. I'm going to have a significant wager on the Aussie team. I've looked up the sports bet. They are paying $1.0005.
So what's that mean? If you put 1,000 on, you win
50 cents.
Stick on the blackjack table.
But the start is 30 and a half, and I think maybe that's worth a go.
30 and a half. So what's that mean? They've got to beat them by 30 and a half points.
31 points.
31 points.
Well, they can do that.
Do you reckon they're really going to pump them? I think they'll win.
I think so. I think.
What about if it's 50-0? Something like that.
I've got 10 grand on it to make $100.
That's right. We'll have a couple of drinks after they win. Yeah. So wouldn't you be better off? And I'm a non-punter, but so let me ask you.
I can see this.
Yeah, no idea. Wouldn't you be better off going, Penrith, into the girls winning, into Warrington, into whoever the last one? How about, what's that called?
Canberra.
A quaddie.
Yep.
A quaddie.
You would be, but your chances are a lot less. And you mentioned Penrith. A lot of mail around town, and I've been hearing it. There's chance of an upset in that game. Cronulla really had the better preparation. The Panthers, their big names haven't had much game time in the pre-season, whereas Craig Fitzgibbon did give his guys more of a run, so I think there'll be more game tuned. Penrith, of course, have lost James Fisher-Harris. And you look at the last 2 years.
What a tough rooster he is.
Yeah. Penrith have started slowly the last 2 years. Not many people realise that. I mean, they only lost 6 games all season just about the last 2 years, but 2 or 3 of them were right at the beginning, and they lost the World Club Challenge both years.
Yeah.
So, and I spoke to a couple of Penrith players, and they admitted, there's a bit of a problem, and it's something we got to address. And they reckon they have addressed it, so we'll see. But it's a game as a punter I'm going to steer away from, because I think Cronulla are a quality team, and they're a chance.
I reckon Nico's got a fair bit to prove this year too. He'll want to come out of the blocks real quick. He got bagged a bit last year for some of those performances in the State of Origin and that. I didn't think he played that bad, but, bagged him. And I reckon he's a gun player. Nico Hines will want to come out. And the skipper, how tough's he?
Yeah.
Ex-House player. So.
Yeah, and you just got to look at his melon. See how tough he is.
We talked about that
yesterday. He puts his head where people are too frightened to put his head. He is one of the toughest. And he's not the biggest bloke. He's not 6'2" and whatever, but he's cut, so fit. Does he ever take a backward step? Has he ever? How many times has he cut his eyebrows and that? You just got to hold your hand up with blokes like that.
Well, as Norman Gunston said, he's the bleeder.
On another note, Sid Punts is sitting to my left here. He used to be a part of the Full Credit to the Boys podcast, which had a cult following, and you did interview Tony previously.
We did.
And you had a particular segment called Porn Star or Athlete. And I don't know, Tony might be a bit mentally scarred from, because I listened to it last night.
Yeah, we did listen to it. It was one of the great podcast segments where we'd throw sporting names or porn star names, and you had to pick whether they were from the world of sport or porn. And the mole got the first 6 right in a row.
What does that say?
I know my sports stars.
We talked about a podcast the other day about clearing your internet history. So
Yeah.
Get onto that.
Yeah, when I was actually having a conversation with some very young crew members at Sydney Weekender one day about viewing certain things. They went, "You don't clear the history." I went, "What's that?" They went, "History, clear, gone. Then turn your computer off and just let it go to sleep for half an hour." I went, "Really?
Good to know."
Yeah. Clear history.
So what do you got planned for the rest of the day? We're off next to the NRL lunch with Andrew Voss is hosting it. Are you going to that as well or not?
No, they don't invite the mole to those sort of things.
Oh, really?
For some reason. Yeah. I didn't even know it was on, to be honest, but I think I might, I've got some stories to bang out, and then I'll prepare for the madness of Fremont Street.
We'll see you there, because we'll be there too.
I've just got one more question before we fry. What do you think the result of this weekend's going to be compared to last weekend? Is it going to be 2 times bigger, 3 times bigger, 4 times bigger? What do you think is going to happen after this weekend?
Yeah, I think it'll be bigger simply because the NRL, I mean, the first time you do something, you always learn, don't you?
Yeah.
And they've made it bigger and better with the 4 teams. As I said, the women's test will just be out of control. The Poms, you know what they're like. They'll just take over the stadium and sing and dance. And I don't think the Americans are used to that sort of thing either. So I'm not sure actually how many Americans will turn up, but probably a couple of thousand out of curiosity. You know, I reckon they'll be throwing tickets at people on the strip on game day because they're not going to fill the place, but they'll
What's
get...
it hold? It holds
65.
65, right? There was 40 there last year.
Yeah, and they'll probably get over 50 this year. So it's a big... I mean, you guys have walked around town. There's so many Warriors, Panthers, Jumpers, and even a few Raiders and Sharks ones. So.
One more question, and the mole will know the answer to this. Is the president coming? Is the Donald going to turn up in the chairman's lounge?
Well, I can tell you one thing. I was walking the strip last night for no particular reason. And I saw a guy...
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
I saw a guy in a Donald suit posing for photos with people, so I'm sure he'll be there. The real Don, I don't think so.
I just want to state again that Widow's been invited by Peter V'landys himself up to the chairman's lounge.
I grabbed Peter. This is a funny story because I grabbed Peter V'landys last year when we were here, and Andrew Abdon said, "We got to get you on the podcast." "Oh, not this year, Mike." And Andrew, "Next year we will do it, Mike. No problem, you know." And he's got a fascinating story growing up in South Africa too.
Oh yeah,
this sort of stuff. So yesterday we see Peter V'landys, and Sid goes, "There he is," and he was walking in, so we missed it. Next minute, he was out in that foyer banging the drums and having fun. Unbelievable. So I jumped on him. "Peter, Mike, Whitney." He went, "Oh, Mike." I said, "You said you'd come on our podcast last year." What did he say, Dawes?
He said, "That's the best verbal contract I've ever seen."
And then he said, "You will be in the chairman's lounge, won't you?" And I went, I don't think so. He said, "Yes, you will be. You'll be in the chairman's lounge." I just went, "But there's 4 of us." But I think we're going to be in the bloody... 5 of us.
Hang with us, Tony, hang with us.
But this is... I'm having these weird sort of thoughts now that we're in the chairman's lounge and the president turns up and he's in the chairman's lounge and we've got the podcast set up. And it's like, President Trump, just come over for... Have you got 5? Just talk about the rugby league. And he goes, "Okay, as long as it's nothing to do with China." I mean, how insane would that be?
Well, yeah, anything's...
Is there lobster? I mean, the president and
Well,
the chairman.
the president sees a microphone, he heads straight for it, doesn't he?
So we all agree, I suppose, that this is a huge thing for the NRL and they've really upped the ante. And it's the day of the big launch in Fremont, and that was huge last year. And you're saying it's just going to be chaos tonight.
Yeah, I think it'll be absolute madness. I would hate to be a security guard out there tonight because they gave me a hard time last year just trying to get in. I had all the right credentials, so all these drunks start getting near the players and could turn ugly.
We've got media passes. They might give us the flick. Last year we didn't have them when we got in. How weird's that?
And we've got
finishing off, Dawsey.
We've got the keys to the city, so let's go run amok.
Tony, thank you. We talked about this a year ago. It's taken us a year to get it together. You are a legend, a journalist legend, old school, which I really appreciate. And I don't think you ever wrote a bad word about me. Tony the Mole Adams! How's that? Sid, how's that?
How is that?
How is that? Get that out.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Over and out. And we've got a big day ahead and catch you soon. Ciao.